Hello, Martians! Say hello to the Martian dog. Although she doesn't look like much of a dog at the moment. She sort of looks a bit like a weasel, something like a rodent, because I keep on calling her rodent and she knows that I'm calling her rodent. But this is Wufficus. And we call her Wufficus because Bella just doesn't work for me. I'm sorry. You can't have a Martian dog called Bella. That just sounds so, just totally inappropriate. And let's face it, in this house, I'm totally outnumbered in terms of boys to girls. And we added another girl dog after having had a girl cat. And I'm not getting any better in terms of the boy to girl ratio here. So I decided that if she was going to be a girl dog in this house, she was at least going to be manly about it. And so her name is Wufficus. So, Phoenix.
Yeah.
We're visiting today, aren't we?
Yes.
We're visiting where?
The Undiscovered Country.
That's right. And why is it undiscovered?
Because it's the future.
That's right. See? It's all so clever. So we're talking about the Undiscovered Country because we've just done our podcast, in fact, on the Undiscovered Country. And if you're wondering why we're not out and about, because I had said we were going to be out and about, what we kind of agreed to is the weekend episode that we do, video episode that we do, we're going to do it in the studio because it's just too flipping hot generally to be out and about.
Especially in summer. Once summer's over, maybe we'll go out and about.
Exactly.
But right now, no.
Wintertime, we might be in a better position to do that. Summertime, no. However, the midweek episode, we can do that out and about because that's generally going to be late in the afternoon, come early evening. And the temperatures generally are a little bit more acceptable. Melting hot is generally not, in my view, acceptable. So, the Undiscovered Country. Now, if you've seen the Undiscovered Country, you may have thought of this, but the Undiscovered Country parallels a event in the real world, and a series of events, in fact, in the real world. In 1986, those of us who were around in 1986, you will remember a small event that occasionally appeared in the newspapers, occasionally appeared on the TV. Not many people talked about it, but, it was kind of in the background, and that is the Chernobyl disaster that basically irradiated much of the planet and, was responsible for a lot of problems all around the world, not least in Europe, where they had a lot of problems selling their produce, particularly their farm produce, as a result of radioactive contamination. Go Russia. Now, as a result of Chernobyl, I think it's fair to say that you had the military of Russia was soaking up a lot of resources. The country was not in a great place. The people were not in a great place. This led, of course, to the fall of the Berlin Wall and the general collapse of the Cold War in general. Basically, Russia just ran out of steam. It just couldn't keep it up anymore. And when it comes down to it, spookily, when you look at the Undiscovered Country, you have a disaster. You have two Cold War superpowers in the Klingons and the Federation who don't trust each other. The thing that triggers the movement towards peace is an absolute disaster, an ecological disaster, no less, a blow-up kind of disaster where they didn't just blow up a nuclear power station, they blew up a small moon. And as a result of blowing up a small moon, that led to peace talks and eventually to peace. But not before James Tiberius Kirk and friends had to save the world yet again. Sorry, not the world. In this case, they're saving the galaxy because James Tiberius Kirk, as Wufficus can attest to, because she watched the movie with me, she was a very dutiful dog, except for when she decided to, late in the movie, disappear because I think Phoenix offered a better option.
I wasn't there. I wasn't the one who was offering the better option. I think it was the duck.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway.
Former podcaster.
She ditched me for the apocalypse. How dare she? Anyway, she ditched us for the finality of the movie. But she did enjoy it, and we did have a in-depth philosophical debate as we were going through the movie. Although Wufficus tends to take political positions that revolve around dog food and ice cream.
Yeah.
And her main question was, how was the fall of the Klingon Empire going to affect the availability of ice cream? And I suggested that singers replicators haven't really been invented at this stage in the game, and they're still cooking them in the gallery. There could be a shortage of ice cream.
Oh no.
And she was actually quite upset about the idea that there could...
Look how depressed she is.
Exactly. You can see the effect upon her of the fact that the fall of the Klingon Empire could see a shortage in ice cream. This is what happens to her. See? So she's very politically engaged. So politically engaged that she gets quite depressed. Now, we are doing this politics session, of course, because we want to see how science fiction has handled politics, but more to the point, what relationship science fiction's politics have with current politics. Now, when we did the podcast and we went through this in a little bit more detail, we looked at the way in which the way in which this is kind of presented. Now, this is in 1991, so we're talking pretty much at the end of the Cold War. We are talking just after the fall of the Berlin Wall, the reunification of Germany, and this is before the world has kind of gone into globalization and all the benefits that come forward. So James Tiberius at the end of this movie is basically saying, you know what? We've had this really rough time. We've hated each other for a long time, but you know what? It might all just end well. Well, of course, we know now how it all ends, and it ends with the election of Donald Trump. much to many people's horror. I can't say that I'm necessarily horrified by Donald Trump, but that's largely because I was none too surprised at the election of Donald Trump. Anyway, so what we sort of talked through in the podcast in detail, and we'll quickly go through now, is you have this great big historical event, which, James T. Kirk is looking to with great positiveness, sees all the benefits, etc. But one of the things which I kind of highlighted in the podcast is often when these changes come, so often when we have these big seismic shifts, the world kind of, moves along. There is nobody in government that's usually tasked with kind of keeping the temperature of the community in terms of, who's winning and who's losing. Now, globalization has had some really, really good impacts for many, many people and created a whole lot of opportunities. But equally, there are groups of people who have been disadvantaged by globalization, particularly those who worked in more traditional physical labor type roles where they've seen their jobs either go overseas or just plain out disappear altogether. In fact, I did a podcast during the US election where I covered an interview with Zoltan Isvan, who made the rather poignant point, that with Europe testing at the moment robotic truck drivers and the potential impacts that could have on the trucking industry, not to mention reducing costs, reducing accidents, better efficiency, all those kinds of things. However, there are 4 million truck drivers in the US, and most of them have guns. So, just saying that there could be some negative consequences from the advancement of that technology. And globalization has facilitated these disruptive technologies that have made, particularly the technology companies, a truckload of money, but have also impacted a lot of people's lives, and nobody's been called to account for that. Now, am I saying they should be called to account for it? No, but one of the points that I made during the podcast is that governments have been very, very bad at dealing with globalization in terms of their local economy. Now, do I believe that Donald Trump is the answer to all of this, that he's going to fix all of our problems, that Brexit and Donald Trump are the solution to all of this? And I'm going to say that no, I don't believe that, and not because he's a racist, sexist, homophobe and all of that kind of stuff. And I have to say, the fact that there is this large group of people who are willing to demonize these people who vote for Trump, or, who see them as the enemy, as, racist, sexist, this is proof of the sexism of white people, are just generic one-issue people who kind of have to shoehorn everything that happens in the world into their ideology. Otherwise, they just can't get out of bed in the morning. And that's absolutely not helpful to anybody either. So, if Donald Trump isn't the answer, what is the answer? Well, for a start, all of these technologies that come in and displace, unfortunately what happens, and this happens as far back as just the simple advent of mobile phones. So for example, when you had the first mobile phones, Prior to that, you used to have much larger offices full of people who had to coordinate, field workers and all that kind of stuff because, people had to have their appointments coordinated. You had to have diaries out in advance. There were a whole lot of steps that had to happen because you didn't have that permanent connection of people. But now, of course, with mobile technology, none of those people are needed anymore. Now, while they've been happily moved on, that doesn't mean that appropriate jobs to their skills have been created to replace them. Of course they haven't, because the simple fact is those jobs are no longer required. Those people are going to have to do something different. And we've had this happening now for the last 20, 30 years, and it's only going to get worse because you're going to see things like accountants and all those sorts of things becoming redundant over the next 10 to 15 years as technology replaces even brainy workers. So you're going to see even brainy workers being taken out of the equation. Does this mean that all of a sudden, because all these people are no longer needed and all this automation means that we've all got a lot more leisure time? Well, that's part of the conversation that people are starting to have. Should we have a living wage? Should we basically even be forcing people to work if we get to a point where the robot economy essentially does everything for us? Should we do that? Now, do I agree with that? Don't I agree with that? I think that's actually a positive part of that discussion. I think we should be having that conversation because, but still, nonetheless, people often want to work. They want to have meaningful lives. They want to participate in the workforce. For men in particular, if they don't have meaningful work that they can do that fits their skill set, then depression sets in. And then you have all of these social problems that people are worried about of domestic violence, alcoholism, abuse, and all that kind of stuff can be directly tied to things like a lack of work for men in particular, because men just need to be doing something constructive. So what I'm saying is that, in that moment when we all thought that the Cold War was going to usher in this great new era, and it has ushered in this great new era, there are people who've not been able to participate in that great new era. And simply labeling them racist, sexist, misogynist, whatever label you want to put on them, is not actually going to make the world a better place. And it's certainly not going to make anything better for you, because ultimately, while you're busy slapping labels on them because, at the moment, they're the ones who are being locked out, technology at some point will be coming to knock on your door, and then you might be the one that has to make those changes. And whether you'll take to those changes all that kindly either is another matter. Point being, pointing those fingers, not necessarily going to help. So, Donald, if you really want to fix America, if you really want to make America great again, maybe you could look at how people can get skilled, particularly men, get more men back into the labor force, not just doing manual jobs, but or get creative. Create, not necessarily, bringing back those old jobs, because trust me, those old jobs aren't coming back. No matter what you do, they're not coming back. There are economic reasons why those jobs disappeared. Those reasons haven't shifted, aren't going anywhere anytime soon. That doesn't mean that you can't get creative and look at ways in which we can create new jobs, new opportunities for people, create better ways for people to access that global economy. Stop creating winners and losers. Stop having tech companies making shed loads of cash off ordinary people while taking their jobs away from them, either by shipping things overseas or by promoting automation that essentially makes them redundant. And that, I think, is something that all technology companies and all politicians need to address rather urgently. Otherwise, you're going to see more rises of people like Donald Trump and Brexit, and in our country, one nation. So that is the lesson I think that we need to take away from Star Trek, The Undiscovered Country, that the undiscovered country is a wonderful place, can be a wonderful place, but like every country, when you go into a new country, you actually need to pay attention to what's going on around you and make sure that, when you go to this undiscovered country called the future, you take care of your people when you get there. Anyway, that's my thoughts for the day. We will bring back Martian Dog again at some point, maybe next weekend. I don't know. She seems to be getting very engaged in the politics. As I said, the potential of the fall of the Klingon Empire to ruin the ice cream economy was definitely high on her priority list. Whichever episode we're going to do next, I'm not quite sure.
Bioshock.
Bioshock. Okay, so we're doing Bioshock and Ayn Rand. Oh, we're getting into heavy libertarian country. Oh gosh, what the heck she's going to come up with next week? Now we're getting into heavy. This is the most libertarian dog you've ever seen. She is going to be full on Ayn Rand for us next week. I can assure you. She will be definitely right up there. Definitely saying free market economy, get rid of government altogether. I can tell you, you can expect that. Anyway, thanks Martian Dog. Thank you, Phoenix.
That's okay.
We'll see you next week.
See you next week.